Scammers want you to install this app to steal your money. And here is the genuinely important thing worth understanding. Right at the start, the specific app we are talking about in this video is not some obscure, obviously malicious piece of malware hiding on a sketchy website. It is a completely legitimate, widely used, entirely legal remote access tool. The exact same kind of software your own company's IT department or a genuine computer repair technician might reasonably ask you to install. And that is precisely what makes this particular scam so genuinely dangerous. So in this video, we are going to walk through exactly how remote access and screen sharing scams actually work, the real documented cases showing just how much money victims have lost in a matter of minutes, the specific apps scammers most commonly ask victims to install, why this exact scam has recently spread aggressively through WhatsApp specifically, and the complete practical checklist you genuinely need to know before ever installing an app someone else asks you to download. So let us start with the fundamental mechanics of exactly how this entire scam actually operates, because understanding the full sequence genuinely helps you recognize it the moment it starts happening to you, and it typically begins in one of a small handful of genuinely common ways. A phone call from someone claiming to be from your bank, from Microsoft, from Apple, or from your own company's IT department. An unsolicited pop-up on your computer screen claiming your device has been infected with a virus and providing a phone number to call for immediate help. Or, increasingly throughout 2025 and 2026 specifically, an unexpected video call arriving directly through WhatsApp from an unknown number. And it is genuinely worth understanding exactly why scammers have specifically pivoted toward this newer WhatsApp-based approach recently, since security researchers have been actively tracking a rapidly expanding social engineering campaign, specifically abusing WhatsApp's own screen sharing feature, which was originally added to the app back in 2023 for entirely legitimate purposes. And here is exactly how this specific version of the scam unfolds. A stranger pings you on WhatsApp with an unexpected video call, and if you pick up, even just for a few seconds, that is genuinely all the time a scammer needs to begin the next phase of the attack. Since fraudsters running this specific campaign typically impersonate a trusted authority, a bank representative, a government official, or a technical support agent, and then steer the victim directly into either sharing their screen live during that call or installing a separate remote access tool entirely, under the specific guise of providing help or support. And it is genuinely worth understanding just how much financial damage this exact tactic has already caused in documented real-world cases, since researchers have specifically tracked one campaign responsible for draining $700,000 from victims combined, occurring within a matter of minutes once a victim actually agreed to share their screen. And it is genuinely worth understanding the specific technical detail behind exactly how this particular campaign operated, since scammers running this specific scheme would display a deceptive banner directly within the shared screen labeled WhatsApp automation, specifically designed to make the entire interaction look considerably more legitimate and official than it actually was, while a malicious payload researchers have named Maverick operated quietly in the background. And this specific malware was delivered through a compressed file containing a Windows shortcut file, specifically engineered to trigger the command prompt or PowerShell, reaching O, mute to an external server to download additional malicious code, all while specifically checking for and avoiding detection by reverse engineering tools that a security researcher might use to analyze it, meaning this represents genuinely sophisticated, deliberately engineered criminal software, not some crude, easily detectable scam. And it is genuinely worth understanding exactly what scammers can actually see and do once a victim agrees to share their screen specifically, since this genuinely explains why the financial damage in these cases tends to happen so remarkably quickly. Once screen sharing is active, criminals can see absolutely everything happening on your device in real time. Your banking apps, any one-time passwords or verification codes appearing on screen, your private messages and your personal photos. And the actual damage that ultimately occurs depends specifically on what happens to be visible or accessible during that shared session. But security researchers specifically identify 3 genuinely serious categories of harm that consistently result from this exact scam. Financial theft specifically through unauthorized transfers or fraudulent credit card charges, account takeover specifically resulting in victims losing access to their own email or social media accounts entirely, and identity fraud specifically where scammers use a victim's personal details to open entirely new accounts under that victim's name. And it is genuinely worth understanding that the deception frequently does not even stop after that initial call ends, since researchers have specifically documented that after the first call, fraudsters will often send a victim a link to install a separate, dedicated remote access application, commonly naming specific legitimate tools like AnyDesk or TeamViewer, falsely claiming this additional installation is needed to complete some kind of verification process. And installing that separate application genuinely grants the scammer considerably deeper, more persistent access to the victim's device than screen sharing alone would have provided, and it is genuinely worth taking a moment to specifically name the legitimate remote access tools scammers most commonly exploit throughout this entire broader category of scam, since understanding these specific names genuinely helps you recognize exactly what you're being asked to install the moment it happens. AnyDesk, TeamViewer, LogMeIn, and SplashTop all represent genuinely legitimate, widely used software, employed every single day by real businesses, schools, and IT departments around the world for entirely legitimate remote support purposes. And it is genuinely critically important to understand that the software itself is not the problem. These companies have built genuinely useful, properly engineered tools. The problem arises entirely from how criminals specifically exploit and misuse this exact same legitimate software as part of a deliberate social engineering scheme. Meaning simply knowing the name of one of these apps tells you absolutely nothing about whether a specific request to install it is legitimate or fraudulent. What matters entirely is the specific context and circumstances surrounding exactly why you're being asked to install it in the first place. And it is 6% of adults between 18 and 34 years old would actually agree to share their online banking or investment portal screen with someone they had never previously met. A genuinely sobering statistic, specifically demonstrating that younger, generally more technically comfortable users are honestly not meaningfully more resistant to this specific manipulation tactic than older generations often assume to be more vulnerable to online scams generally. And it is genuinely worth addressing directly, a considerably newer, separate variation of this exact same broader threat category that has specifically emerged throughout 2026, involving fake, convincingly designed download pages impersonating well-known, trusted websites, since security researchers have specifically documented an active campaign using fake, lookalike versions of CNN's website, along with fake Stremio and fake Avast installer pages, all specifically designed to trick unsuspecting users into installing genuinely legitimate remote management software that has already been pre-linked directly to the attacker's own account, meaning the victim believes they are simply downloading a familiar, trusted application, while actually installing software that immediately, automatically connects back to a criminal's own remote access dashboard the moment installation completes. And this specific technique genuinely represents an evolution beyond the phone call and video call based approaches we discussed earlier, since it specifically targets people who are actively, voluntarily searching for and downloading software themselves, rather than requiring a scammer to successfully manipulate a victim during a live phone or video interaction first. And it is genuinely worth walking through the complete, specific set of red flags that should immediately trigger genuine suspicion whenever any of these scenarios occurs, since recognizing these specific warning signs early genuinely represents your single most effective defense against this entire category of scam. The first, most fundamental red flag involves being contacted unexpectedly, specifically worth remembering that legitimate banks, government agencies, and technology companies essentially never initiate unsolicited contact, specifically asking you to install remote access software or share your screen, meaning any unexpected call, message, or video call making. Exactly this kind of request should immediately trigger significant suspicion regardless of how professional or convincing the caller happens to sound. The second major red flag involves urgency and pressure specifically, since scammers running this exact scheme consistently rely on creating a sense of immediate crisis. Your account has been compromised, suspicious activity has been detected, you need to act right now, specifically designed to prevent you from taking the time to think clearly, verify the caller's actual identity, or consult with a trusted family member or friend before taking any action. The third major red flag involves any request specifically to view or access your actual banking or financial accounts directly during a screen sharing or remote access session, since Abu Dhabi police, in a specific public awareness campaign on exactly this topic, have directly stated that legitimate banks and financial institutions simply do not ask customers to disclose account details, card numbers, passwords, PINs, or one-time passwords under any circumstances whatsoever, meaning any request for exactly this kind of information during a remote session represents an unambiguous, definitive red flag. And the fourth major red flag involves being specifically asked to install a second additional piece of software after an initial call or interaction has already begun. Precisely the specific pattern we discussed earlier regarding scammers following up an initial WhatsApp screen sharing call with a subsequent request to install AnyDesk or TeamViewer under the pretext of completing verification, since this specific escalation pattern represents one of the clearest, most consistent signatures of this entire scam category across virtually every documented case we have discussed throughout this video. And now let us walk through the complete practical checklist of exactly what you should actually do to protect yourself, both proactively, before any of this ever happens to you, and reactively, if you ever find yourself already in the middle of exactly this kind of suspicious interaction. The first genuinely important protective step involves independently verifying any caller's identity before taking any action whatsoever. Meaning if someone calls claiming to represent your bank or a company you actually do business with, hang up entirely, and then independently look up that company's official customer service number directly through their genuine website or the number printed on the back of your actual bank card, rather than trusting any phone number or contact information the caller themselves provides you with during that original call. The second genuinely important step involves never installing any software specifically because someone on an unexpected call or message asked you to, regardless of how urgent or official that specific request sounds, since a genuine, legitimate technical support interaction that you yourself specifically initiated by calling a company's own verified support line is honestly a completely different situation from an unsolicited call or message asking you to proactively install something. The third genuinely important step involves specifically ending any call or video call immediately the moment anyone asks you to share your screen or install remote access software, without feeling any social obligation to be polite or to fully hear out their specific explanation first, since a legitimate support interaction will never be genuinely harmed by you calling back through an independently verified number instead. And the fourth genuinely important step, specifically worth understanding as it directly connects to a topic we have covered in a previous video on this channel, involves actually enabling the specific protective features increasingly been built directly into modern smartphone operating systems, specifically to counter this exact category of scam, since Android has specifically introduced protections that block certain high-risk actions, including sideloading an app for the first time or granting accessibility permissions, while you are actively on a call with someone not already saved in your contacts and separately automatically prompts you to stop screen sharing the moment a call actually ends, precisely closing the exact window scammers rely on to continue viewing your screen even after you believe the interaction has already concluded, and enabling these specific built-in protections, alongside the broader advanced protection mode we covered in detail in a previous video, genuinely represents a meaningful, proactive additional layer of defense specifically worth setting up now, well before you ever actually encounter this exact scam yourself. And it is genuinely worth understanding exactly what to do if you have already installed remote access software or already shared your screen before realizing something was genuinely wrong, since acting quickly in exactly this specific situation genuinely can still meaningfully limit the resulting damage. Security researchers specifically emphasize that ending the session and immediately calling your bank's dedicated fraud helpline directly can limit the harm and, in some documented cases, actually stop financial losses before they have a chance to fully spread across multiple accounts. Meaning, even if you have already made a mistake, moving quickly and decisively genuinely still matters considerably. And the specific, complete list of immediate actions worth taking includes disconnecting your device from the internet entirely, immediately uninstalling any remote access software you may have installed during the interaction, changing your passwords for any accounts that may have been visible or accessible during the session, specifically prioritizing your banking and email accounts first, contacting your bank's fraud department directly through their officially verified phone number to place a hold on your accounts and monitor for any unauthorized transactions, and, genuinely worth doing as well, running a complete security scan using reputable antivirus or anti-malware software, specifically to check for any additional malicious software that may have been installed alongside whatever remote access tool you were originally asked to download. And it is genuinely worth closing with a broader, honest observation regarding exactly why this specific category of scam continues proving so consistently, persistently effective despite years of ongoing public awareness, campaigns specifically warning about it, since the fundamental reason connects directly to something genuinely worth understanding about human psychology more broadly. These scams do not succeed because their targets are careless or unintelligent. They succeed because they are specifically, deliberately, engineered to exploit completely normal, reasonable human behavior, trusting an authority figure, wanting to quickly resolve a problem that sounds urgent and serious, and extending the same basic courtesy to a stranger on a video call that you would naturally extend to someone genuinely calling to help you. And understanding this specific psychological mechanism genuinely matters, because it means the appropriate response to learning about this scam is not judgment toward anyone who has fallen victim to it, but rather building the specific, practical habits we have walked throughout this entire video, verifying independently, refusing to install software under pressure, and ending suspicious interactions immediately without guilt. Precisely the kind of deliberate, practiced response that genuinely protects you regardless of how convincing any future version of this scam eventually becomes. And if a friend or family member ever does fall victim to exactly this kind of scam, the most genuinely helpful response is calm, practical support in taking the specific recovery steps we outlined, rather than criticism, since these scams are specifically engineered by genuinely skilled, deliberate criminals to work. Precisely as intended against exactly the kind of trusting, good faith behavior most people reasonably display in their everyday interactions with others. If you found this breakdown of remote access and screen sharing scams genuinely helpful, please take a moment to like this video, share it with anyone in your life who might be at risk of exactly this kind of scam, especially older family members or anyone less familiar with how these specific tactics work. And subscribe to this channel so you continue receiving practical, genuinely useful security breakdowns as scammers continue developing new variations of the same underlying tactic throughout the rest of the year. Let us know in the comments below whether you or someone you know has ever encountered this exact kind of scam attempt, and we will see you in the next video. Until then, stay informed, stay appropriately skeptical of any unexpected requests to install software or share your screen, and stay genuinely in control of exactly what runs on your own devices. And before we fully wrap up, it is genuinely worth addressing a handful of the most common questions people tend to ask once they actually understand this fuller picture of exactly how these scams operate. Starting with one of the most frequently asked, is it ever actually safe to install remote access software when someone asks me to? And the honest answer is genuinely yes, but only under very specific, verifiable circumstances. If you yourself proactively called a company's officially verified support line, or if you're working directly with your own company's known, verified IT department through channels you have used before, installing remote access software in that specific context is genuinely normal and safe. The critical distinguishing factor is always whether you initiated the contact through a channel you independently verified versus whether someone else initiated unexpected contact with you first. Another genuinely common question people ask is whether iPhone users need to worry about this scam as much as Android users, given how much of this video's specific examples focused on Android protections. And the honest answer is that this entire scam category genuinely affects users of every platform equally, since the fundamental vulnerability lies in the social engineering and human manipulation aspect rather than any specific weakness in one particular operating system. Meaning iPhone users should apply the exact same verification habits and skepticism we discussed throughout this video, even though the specific built-in technical protections we mentioned happen to be Android-specific examples. A third question, genuinely worth addressing, is whether banks and legitimate companies ever have any legitimate reason to ask a customer to share their screen. And the honest answer is that this is genuinely rare and should always be treated with extra caution, even when it does occur, since the overwhelming standard practice across legitimate financial institutions specifically avoids ever requesting screen sharing or remote access from customers, precisely because of how heavily this exact channel has been exploited by criminals. Meaning if any company does make this kind of unusual request, independently verifying through a separately confirmed channel before proceeding remains essential, regardless of how legitimate the original request might have seemed. And a fourth question genuinely worth touching on is whether antivirus software can reliably detect and block this specific type of scam before any damage occurs. And the honest answer is that because the actual software involved, AnyDesk, TeamViewer, and similar tools, is completely legitimate and not inherently malicious, traditional antivirus software generally cannot block the installation itself, meaning the human verification habits and behavioral red flags we walked throughout this entire video genuinely represent your primary, most reliable line of defense, with antivirus and security software serving a more valuable role afterward, specifically helping detect and remove any additional malware that may have been installed alongside the legitimate remote access tool during a genuine attack.